Conflict. Ever since we've had people, we've had conflict. So, since, forever. Throughout history, people have solved their issues in all kinds of ways. Like sword fights, which are kind of cool, or jousts, which are kind of crazy. And while the arena has changed, conflict is still happening today. At school, at home, and online. But we can fight the right way, where both sides win. On the battlefield.
If you've ever been in any kind of relationship, of friendship, dating, or any sort of family structure, you know that conflict is going to happen. There's no getting around it. You want to go to the movies, but your parents say no. Conflict. Your best friend hangs out Friday night with a girl who totally shamed you on Instagram. Conflict. Your boyfriend doesn't treat you the way that you think you should be treated. Conflict. It doesn't matter who you are or how smart or good looking or right you think you are. Conflict will be a part of your life. It's unavoidable. And if that's true, then we have to find a way to have disagreements without being so dysfunctional. Like we said in part 1, the biggest problem in handling conflict is that we just don't see it modeled that well. For many of us, our family doesn't handle conflict well, our friends don't either, and on top of that, we watch reality shows that thrive on a massive amount of conflict and drama. So a lot of times we'll take our cue on how to deal with conflict from shows where producers just lock people in a house just to see what will happen. And there's name calling and fist fighting and hair pulling and drink throwing. And it's really fun to watch. I mean, it's entertaining, but it's super dysfunctional. Your conflict may not look like a reality show, but chances are that our reaction to conflict isn't all that great either. At the root of almost every reaction to conflict is anger. Anger is what makes reality television so exciting. I mean, one simple disagreement can turn into a brawl on the front lawn. And anger is interesting to watch, but in real life, it can make us completely unhealthy if we don't learn to handle anger well. See which one of these examples that you can relate to as it pertains to your anger. There's the Incredible Hulk. Okay, some sort of disagreement comes up and immediately your blood pressure starts to rise and you start to sweat and the veins in your neck start to pulsate like you're the Incredible Hulk, #raging. Or there's the Stuffer. This is the person you back off and you distance yourself from other people. You let your mind kind of stew on whatever is bothering you. When someone asks what's wrong, you say, nothing. But inside, you're just boiling. Or how about this one? The everything is great person. That you hate conflict so much that you will do just about anything to avoid it, including denying that conflict even exists. You totally ignore it and brush it under the carpet so you don't have to deal with it. And then there's the stealth attacker. Okay, like denying conflict, you pretend everything is fine, even to the person who hurts you. But when they're not around, you immediately find subtle ways to talk about them behind their back. You make them look bad and you win people over to your side. It's called passive aggressive. It's a classic move. See, those methods may work for a while, but let's be honest. They aren't exactly setting you up for success in the long run, are they? I mean, when conflict knocks on your door and you respond one of these ways, it usually ends up creating more stress and pain in your life. But you can be different, and you should be different. Why? Because conflict is never going to go away. Conflict is not a high school thing. It's not a teenage thing. It's a people thing. You will always have a family member or a spouse or a friend or a boss or a coworker who knows how to stir you up and get you angry. Even your most trusted friends will create serious conflict in your life at times. You can't control people. But learning how to respond to them may be the very thing that saves your sanity and your relationships. Let's stop here for just a minute and think about something. The Bible tells us that Jesus experienced everything that we have experienced. But sometimes, let's be honest, that's hard to believe. I mean, did Jesus really know what it felt like to get into an argument over which comedy movie is the funniest? Or, did Jesus really know what it's like to have a girlfriend start an argument with him over a text using only emojis? Or did Jesus understand that not getting along with a teammate on the basketball team or have his mom yell at him about his geometry homework? I mean, sometimes thinking that way, it seems impossible. But when it comes to conflict and communication, it isn't very hard to imagine that Jesus can relate. I mean, he traveled all around with 12 guys for 3 years. All right, that's going to create some fights. They had oftentimes no idea where they would sleep from night to night or where their food would come from. And, occasionally he had to escape from overly enthusiastic or angry mobs. It wasn't like Jesus lived during a conflict-free time. So before we move on, let's all take comfort in the fact that when Jesus teaches us to live at peace, he can actually relate to any conflict that we go through. And with that in mind, let's move back to a time before Jesus, okay? Before Jesus was even on earth. It's a passage from the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament, and Proverbs is really just a book filled with great advice and honest insights, and most of it was written by King Solomon, one of the most famous kings of Israel. He's considered to be the wisest man who ever lived. I mean, basically, this means that we want to pay attention to what he's saying. And what I love about Proverbs is that while Solomon was really wise, he didn't always live in a really wise way. He knew the best thing to do, but he didn't always do it, which I think makes him a lot like me and you and gives it a little more credibility. I mean, the stuff he shared was stuff he sometimes learned the hard way. And in Proverbs 29:11, Solomon writes, "Fools give vent to their rage, but the wise bring calm in the end." This is so smart, especially when we consider the position that Solomon was in. He was the most powerful man in the known world. He was rich and he was famous. He could do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. He was king. So if he was angry, he had every right to go off on whatever got him fired up. No one was sitting around telling him to take a deep breath and think about it first. I mean, when you're the king, you're usually surrounded by people who agree with you no matter what, even if it's stupid. So I bet there was a lot of times Solomon gave full vent to his rage, total explosion. I mean, we're talking Hulk here. And he could do it because he was king. No one would stop him. But even kings eventually get to a place where they realize that letting their anger and frustration get the best of them isn't doing them any favor. See, it doesn't really matter if you can get away with your anger. In the end, you can't get away from the consequences your anger creates. And that's what Solomon learned. Going off makes you feel better for a minute, but it doesn't make you or the relationship better. Wise and smart people know that ultimately relationships are better and more important than a quick emotional release. Our response to anger keeps us out of danger. And like I said a minute ago, anger doesn't look the same for everybody. No matter how you express it, this verse applies to you. The foolish are led by their rage, where the wise, on the other hand, feel angry, but they don't let it lead them. They don't let it control them. They don't let their anger call the shots. They know that in the end, anger doesn't accomplish its goal, where peace, calm, ultimately brings the outcome that we want. So how do we get to the place where we can feel angry without letting anger call the shots? How do we handle conflict in a way that allows us to feel frustration without letting it be the thing that decides how we handle the fight? There are 4 things that you can practice immediately that will make you better at conflict right away. And it may sound silly, but if it helps you remember when you get home, then I'm okay with this. It's an acronym for the word PEER, P-I-E-R. And the P stands for this: pause. See, the problem with anger is that it comes quickly and it demands an immediate reaction. We've all done something or said something in anger that later on we wish we hadn't said it. And so taking a few minutes to breathe, to pause, allows some of the anger to lose its power. If you feel just fired up after a second, consider waiting a little bit longer. Take a walk, go for a run, read a book, do something that distracts you. If you're tired, wait to deal with the anger until the next day when you have some perspective and the conflict doesn't feel as consuming as it did the day before. So P is pause. The I in the word peer is identify. Sometimes we get so caught up in the emotion of conflict that we never take the time to actually figure out what it is that's bothering us. So we've got to identify that. Sure, you're mad at your mom for being late to pick you up, but maybe that anger is compounded by a rough day that you had at practice. Sure, you're frustrated that teacher wouldn't accept your late homework, but is that all that's going on inside? The truth is, our anger is rarely about one thing. It's usually a combination of several things. So we have to get really good at identifying what's really bothering us. And you'll do a better job finding a solution when you can identify the true problem. The E in the word peer stands for express. See, it isn't bad to communicate when you feel like you've been wrong, as long as you express it in a healthy way. Once you've calmed down, you make the effort to communicate face-to-face with that person, because text and social media, they just allow for too much misunderstanding. Plus, that person can't really hear your voice tone over text. So being able to see someone eye to eye allows you to communicate as clearly as possible, and it may keep you from saying the nasty stuff that is just too easy to say through text. Usually stuff that you and I regret at a later time. So face-to-face allows you to see how your words impact someone. Express it in a good way. And finally, the R in peer is release. Eventually, you have to let it go. You have to release it. If you try to respond in a healthy way and nothing feels resolved the way you'd like it to, you have to come to terms with that. You have to make peace with the fact that you did what you could and it didn't go the way you wanted. So it's time for forgiveness. You must forgive, and then forgive again. You release someone from what they owe you, whether they ask you to do that or not. And when you do that, it's ultimately bringing you peace. And forgiveness takes practice. And the good news is you and I will have lots of chances to practice and get better at it. If you want to get better at conflict, P-I-E-R, peer. It's an incredible place to start. Pause, identify, express, and release. Have you seen an actual pier before? A pier is a raised structure that goes out and over the water. It allows currents and tides to move underneath it while it offers something sturdy and steady to stand on. And essentially, that's what these steps are going to do for you. They're going to give you the tools to rise above the conflict and stay steady and sturdy no matter what's going on around you. They'll give you a response to anger that keeps you out of danger. Basically, conflict is inevitable. It's going to happen. And it doesn't have to be bad. But the way you handle it will either take your life in a good or a bad direction. So we have to learn how to control our anger without allowing anger to control us. We have to learn not to blow up with rage or stuff it inside and pout or totally ignore it or go passive aggressive. We have to learn to process anger in a way that brings peace instead of getting us to a dangerous place. You don't have to learn the hard way. Instead, you can put in the hard work now and reap the benefits now and later, and you won't regret it. So as you head out today, start thinking of some areas in your life where you are experiencing conflict right now. What step of the peer, P-I-E-R, do you need to take next? And how might you respond to anger in a way that keeps you out of danger?